right, in the video today, we're going to go over charging, battery charging on the MGB, and in particular, how to test if your alternator is in fact charging the battery. So my alternator is not charging my battery, but I'm going to show you how I can tell that. First of all, how do you notice that just from driving? So the symptoms that I had are that, these cars are not driven every single day, so you don't notice when you have your battery is draining over time. You might take it for short jaunts, do a quick little 20-minute drive, and then you come home, you park it, and then the whole week will go by, and then you'll take it for another drive next week. The symptom that I was having was I would get to a place and it would be hard starting. So the reason why it was hard starting is that the battery was being taxed. The amperage from the battery was being drawn because it had a low charge. It's a new battery, so it'll recover on its own to a certain degree, but without charging it, the battery will go dead. And so the symptom is that when you get to where you're going, you try to start it and the car just doesn't start. And so let me explain to you how that works. So the car will turn over. The starter will sound like it's running. You'll start to question whether you have spark, whether it's flooded, whether the carburation is getting enough fuel. You go through all the tests, right? But ultimately, the problem turns out that it's about amperage. MGB is a small little car. There's no room anywhere in the engine compartment for the battery, so the battery is sitting behind the seat. As such, the main power terminal comes down from underneath the car, and it is connected right down here to the starter. And then all the rest of the power cables that come up from that come from that connection up to the rest of the wiring harness. And what that does is it tells the starter you can have all of the amperage first and then everything else is secondary. With newer cars that have computers, you'll have a battery up in the front here somewhere, and you'll have a dedicated line that only serves the starter and nothing else. And then you'll have other power cables that will go off into the computer and off into the ignition system, things like that. Even older cars that have a battery in the front, you'll have a dedicated line that goes to the starter, and then all the rest of the wiring harness has a separate line that comes off the battery. You don't have that with the MG. You have a single wire that goes to the starter, and then from the starter, everything else comes up into the wiring harness. That means that the starter gets the electricity first. And if, in my case, you have an electronic ignition, the pickup coil won't be able to have enough amperage to detect whether it needs to make a spark. Even if you don't have electronic ignition, the coil itself makes a strong spark based on the amperage, not necessarily the voltage that it's fed. So it's kind of important that the ignition system get a dedicated amount of amperage, and it won't get that if the starter is running low or if the battery doesn't have enough amperage. And you'll detect that. You'll feel that. When you start the car, it'll turn, but maybe a little bit slower than normal. But it won't kick over. And in some cases, when you're starting the car, when you let go of it, it'll start after you've let go of it, because the starter's no longer running, but the car is still turning, and then you'll get enough power to start the car. That's what I noticed. Actually, that's what helped me to determine I need to look at the alternator. But now those are just kind of happenstance, kind of circumstantial evidence to determine whether or not you need a new alternator is a whole nother test. So let me show you how you need to test your alternator to make sure that your alternator needs to be replaced. All right, so this test starts with the engine turned off. You want to expose the battery, and we're going to check the battery to make sure it has an ample charge. When the battery and the car are idle, the battery should test a little over 12 volts. Some people say 12.5 volts, but it's a 12-volt battery, and it should be a little over 12 volts when it's idle. When nothing's going on, the engine's off and the car is just sitting here resting. just FYI, if you're checking the battery and it's at 9 volts, that means that one of your cells are dead and the battery is dead. It can't even be charged. Anytime your battery gets below 9 volts, just buy a new battery. You're not going to be able to restore that battery. All right, so here's your typical VOM. The most important switch on here is the on-off switch. If you keep it on all the time, you'll never have it available when you want to use it. So just get in the habit of turning this thing off. I always forget myself. So the first thing, it has a lot of different settings. You want to set it to DC 20 volts. I don't know if you can see that. I don't know if you set it up to 250 if it would make a difference, but you don't want to go into the milliamp or the millivolts. You want to be at least 20 volts so that you can get the 12 volt circuit. I'm going to see if I can get this where you can see it. All right, so with the car idle and taking a preliminary look at it with the vehicle idle, we're going to go ahead and check the voltage. Positive on the positive. See, we're starting at 12.6, 12.7. So it's a good, nice charged battery. It's got plenty of strength. Let's go ahead and start the car and have a look at the alternator. All right, same test with the engine running. Positive on positive. Speed is 12.5 volts. So it's actually drawing from the battery, and the battery will eventually become drained. So that tells me that the alternator is not functioning. All right, so let's get rid of this alternator, put a new one in there. All right, so our first task is to remove the battery terminals. You could probably just take the negative terminal off, but I like to take both of them off. I don't want to take any chance of arcing. We're going to be disconnecting the alternator, and that is sharing a very, very large positive terminal on there. So we don't want to take a chance of arcing that off. So make sure you disconnect your battery. All right, so from here it's just a matter of disassembly and reassembly. Pretty straightforward. On the MGB, there's just one connector in the back here. Here we go. Now, I am going to go ahead and disconnect this thermal sensor here. This is the crankcase heat temperature sensor. All right, so this is the wiring loom that goes to that. You can see it has 3 connectors, a small one and 2 kind of larger ones, and then this is for the thermal. I'm going to put that off to the side so it's not in the way. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take this belt off. You do that by loosening this adjuster right here, and then we're just going to pull these bolts off, pull the whole thing out. Alright, so there's the old alternator. Look at that. Of course. Alright, so here's the old alternator. You can see it's a original Lucas. You know, I replaced everything, every piece of rubber and every piece of copper wire in this this car during the restoration, but I didn't replace the old Lucas alternator. That's probably where I went wrong to begin with. Probably should have replaced this straight away. Anyway, this thing has seen plenty of miles. If it could tell its story, it's probably it would be a really, really interesting story. All right, this thing is done. Let's recycle some of the components. We're going to need this mounting bracket, and I think I'm going to replace some of those screws. I don't like the size on them. Here's our new alternator. Nice shiny chrome fan blade. I was tempted to polish this thing up, but I think as long as I keep my hands clean, we can keep it clean and we won't have to polish it up. And it's already got a nice chrome fan blade, so we got that going for us. So let's go ahead and put all this accoutrement on there and get this set up to be put in there. All right, so we have our first snag. The new alternator has a threaded slot for where the slide goes, the adjusting slide, and the other one didn't. The old one didn't have a threaded slot in there. What's more, this appears to be metric. I've got plenty of 1/4 inch coarse and quarter fine bolts and whatnot in my little bolt collection, but I don't have a lot of metrics. So we're gonna have to figure out what kind of thread size that is and get a proper bolt for that. But that's our first snag for the day. But you know, it's going to make that a whole lot easier to tighten, because you don't have to have a wrench or a nut on the back side. It's just one more thing I have to adjust. All right, so the one metric nut that I did find, or the bolt that I did find, is it's got an Allen head on it. So I mean that even looks even better than having a hex nut on there. And I have a tool specifically for that. Fits right in there. So I have a matching one that I'm going to put on the top. So that'll go right up here. That'll be our look right there with the hex nuts. So I kind of like that. It's a little cleaner look. All right, moving forward. Let's get this thing mounted. All right, so got another snafu. So you notice this little bushing here. It's pressed into this back little housing. This bushing on the old one, the old Lucas, is set forward. And on the new one, see on the new one it goes the other direction. So we're going to have to push this back this way. So I'm going to have to get a clamp on there and squeeze this thing back so it goes the other direction. Just one more thing. All right, so you can see how I'm going to do this. I took a socket and, oops, I don't think that's on center. Let me slide this on a little bit. There we go. Got a socket in there. And then I'm just going to push this in with this clamp. It should go into the well of that socket. Come on. Prefer to finesse this thing rather than beat on it with a hammer, but it's fighting with me. There we go. See if we can get that to... We need some movement here. Oops. So here you can see it's making some progress. I just wanted to check that to make sure that we were not hitting the edge of the socket here. All right, continuing. There we go. All right, that should do it. Now we have it on the inside. All right, you can see that this little bushing, it has a little split there. So I mean, it has a spring effect to it. So it's not like it's going to be difficult. And it wasn't that difficult to torque it into place. But now it's in the right orientation. So now I can get back to mounting this thing. All right, so the hits keep coming. So you can see I moved this bushing over to this side, but when you're looking at it now, you can see there's a little bit of a gap. So
You know, with this seated here, I'm going to measure that distance there. I'm going to push that bushing back just to match up so that it matches with that seal. This might actually be adjustable though. I don't know. I'm going to have to make an adjustment, whether I push the bushing back or if this slides, I'll slide this in just to make it match up. But you got to make it so it fits. You got to get the pulley oriented so it lines up, right? So that's really what the goal here is to make sure that the belt and the pulley and everything lines up. So this fitting right here is the 0 point. Everything else needs to just kind of adjust off of that. So I'm going to make those adjustments and then we'll get back at it. All right, so from here you can see got it all matched up. This bracket has a sliding feature right here. You can see barely right there the slot. These allow you to adjust that, and that makes it so that you can adjust the distance here. And it looks like those pulleys are pretty well lined up. It's not going to be a problem. So I didn't need to push this thing back in there. So let's go ahead and get this bolt in here and start adjusting for tightness.
All right, so one last little thing that's going to be a problem here. This, I don't know if you can see, this center connector right here is exceptionally wide, and it doesn't quite fit the center connector on the wiring harness. It's just not quite that wide. So I'm going to trim this down to make it a little easier to fit. It is the right size. That is the thick connector, and it should be the load connector. So hopefully I'll take the risk, and you can benefit. This is just a $58 alternator from Amazon. So probably Chinese made, who knows. I shouldn't be that disparaging. I'm going to go ahead and make this tab a little thinner so that I can slide it onto that connector. All right, let's move on. It's always something, isn't it? All right, so just so you can see a little better what I'm dealing with here. These are the connectors on the original Lucas. This did fit on my harness, and you can see on this one, although this one's tapered, this is a smaller connector, and then on the center one it's the same size, and this is a larger connector. The end one here is the same size. I don't have a problem with that one. That one's going to fit just fine. So I think the smaller connector is gonna be okay, because it's still gonna fit within the confines of the connector that it goes into. But this one here, it just won't even fit. So I need to make this one just a little smaller. So I think we're gonna pull this back shielding off, and then I'm gonna shave off both sides of this. Let's see if we can do that without getting any metal shavings done in the works. But you know, you save money, then you have to spend time, right? It's just too big, it won't fit into the connector. All right. All right, so here you can see these are the shavings. I was able to get them off with just by trimming them with my tin snips. These tin snips have a really nice sharp point on them at the tip, so I was able just to cut them. I cut them down, and then twisted them off with a pair of needle nose so that they wouldn't fall into the works. So there's all the pieces, nothing's missing, and I have fitted it in place before. I went ahead and put the wiring connector on first to confirm that everything was connected and touching. And now I'm back to where we were, back to mounting it. So let's get caught up. All right, let's give you a radiator's eye view
of the belt going on right here. All right, so I'm going to load it onto the drive pulley at the bottom, the harmonic balancer, if you will. Then I'm going to put it around the alternator, and then you can slide. You can slide this alternator back and forth right here with this nut right here. All right, and so we can give it all the space that we need to get it over the top of the water pump. So now we have it all the way around. The belt is doing its thing. The first thing we want to check is to make sure it's true and that there's everything's all lined up, and I think we're good there. Now the top two bolts on the top of the alternator up here, these top two bolts, we have them snug but not tight, and that gives us a pivot point, so we can slide this. So it'll slide right here back and forth. This is snug but loose because we want it to be able to pivot here. So you can see how that mechanism works, right? So now we just want to pull this as tight as we can, and you can even put a cheater bar right up in here. You can put a bar in here and pull it tight so that you get this belt nice and tight. Once you get that as tight as you want, then all you need to do is tighten this knob right here. Everything else can be loose, but as long as this is loose, once you tighten that, then the tension will be brought up. Everything else can be loose, and then you just go back and tighten up all those pivot points later. So this is the only thing that you need to manage as far as pulling this tight. So let's go ahead and do this in real time. I'm going to go ahead and get a little pry bar back here and pull this nice and tight. Now I say pry bar, but it's not really a pry bar. I'm just going to put a little something back there to make it a little easier to pull. That way we can pull it tight. Feels nice and tight. We'll tighten this thing up. For mine, that's a 9/16. Nice large bolt, so it's really easy to get a hold of. All right, that's not going anywhere. All right, let's snug up the rest of these bolts. There's this little hex bolt right here, and then we have the two pivot points up here as well. So then we'll be good to go. All right, now that we've got all that work done in the engine, everything's all connected. Our last task here before we start testing is to go ahead and connect the battery. Now, when you connect your battery from zero here, we have nothing connected. Always connect the positive terminal first, because if while you're tightening it, you have a chance to spark it off on the edges, it's not grounded, so you won't have any problems. So go ahead and put the positive on first, and then the negative. All right, so with the engine running, I got the high beams on. I warmed up the car. Even the cooling fans are running. I wanted to make sure that we're using as much electricity as we could, just to make sure that it charges. When I first turned it on, it didn't need to charge, so the battery didn't show that it was doing anything, which is a little disheartening. But with everything on, I'm drawing enough amperage that now the alternator and the voltage regulator have said that they need to charge. So let's go ahead and show you what it does. So there we got 13.5 volts. So that's proof positive that the new alternator is charging. Alright, so that's how to change the alternator in a 1977 MGB Roadster. If you have any questions or comments on this, please do throw them in the comment section. If any of my projects have helped you out with anything, just make sure you throw a super thanks out there. Those are always great. Thanks. Have a good day. Please consider giving me a super thanks. To do so, find this little 3-button deal here. Click on that, and you'll see a little heart-shaped $sign. If you click on that, you'll see this interface that allows you to scroll up and give me as much as you think it was worth. Click on the buy and send. It'll process through a credit card, and it'll hit my account.
every little bit helps. So thanks much.